A warm welcome to everyone who has joined us today at this side event on carbon neutrality goals and cooperation, sharing ambitions and the way forward. This event takes place during the 78th session of the Commission and on the 75th anniversary celebration of ESCAP. A truly auspicious occasion for all of us, and we wholeheartedly appreciate your presence here at the UNCC and attendance online. We are pleased that this event is co-organized by the Republic of Korea and Vietnam. My name is Ronnie Surakusuma, head of the Southeast Asia Sub-Regional Office, and I shall be guiding you through today's program. Needless to say, today's topic is timely given countries' dismal performance with respect to the SDGs. According to the Asia and the Pacific SDG Progress Report 2022, ESCAP's flagship publication, countries in the region are not on track to achieve the SDGs by 2030. The report finds the progress gap for achieving the SDGs growing wider in the Asia Pacific, which at the rate we are going, the goals will only be in reach by 2065. The report further highlights that the Asia Pacific region is regressing, among others, on SDG goals for climate action, namely SDG 13. What this means is that more needs to be done on global greenhouse gas emissions, reducing heavy reliance on fossil fuel, and speeding up and scaling up the development and application of technologies and practices. That being said, this side event brings the countries together to exchange information and hopefully discuss modalities of collaboration at the regional level. We begin today's program with opening and welcoming remarks from Korea, followed by Vietnam, and then ESCAP. A roundtable discussion will take place, inviting panelists from around the Asia-Pacific region to brief on their national carbon neutrality goals and hopefully come away from the deliberation with areas of collaboration. May I now invite Her Excellency, Ms. Hyun Jenny Kim, Ambassador and Deputy Minister of Climate Change, Republic of Korea. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Armida Alicia Bana, Executive Secretary of UNESCAP, and Mr. Phan Van Thang, Deputy Director General of Climate Change, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Vietnam, who are joining online, and distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen who are here or joining online. It is my great pleasure to welcome all of you to today's event on Asia-Pacific Carbon Neutrality Cooperation, co-organized by the Republic of Korea and Vietnam, which aims to envision the path towards carbon neutrality in the Asia-Pacific and discover possible areas of cooperation that can scale up and speed up climate action in this region. I would like to extend my words of gratitude to Mr. Phan Van Thang for co-hosting today's forum. And I would like to express my special thanks to all those who are joining. Today, we all know that Asia and the Pacific houses the largest and most dynamic economies, as well as countries most affected by the harsh effects of climate change. According to the Global Climate Risk Index, 6 out of 10 most affected countries in the world by extreme weather events during the last 2 decades are our Asia-Pacific neighbors. Even this time, we remember that our neighbors like India and Pakistan are suffering from extreme heat waves. This region we live in is surely a richer but riskier region, and the scientific evidence for stronger climate action is very clear. The most immediate action in our region must be the speeding up and scaling up of climate actions by building regional partnership that enables concrete implementation of the ambitious climate goals. Significant number of countries in this region have already pledged carbon neutrality. Many of them have produced policy documents on this commitment, and some of them codified the commitment in legal form, like the Republic of Korea. If we mutually support by sharing our experiences, knowledge, and lessons learned, carbon neutrality in this region can be achieved earlier than we imagine. I hope UNESCAP, as a useful vehicle and platform, can play a role to facilitate such mutual working. The Republic of Korea has set out its 2050 carbon neutrality goal and the ambitious 2030 NDC to give a clear signal inwards and outwards to boost the transition toward the green economy. Our new administration, who started just a week ago, will do our best to achieve announced goals by establishing a concrete, detailed, and responsible action plans. As an effort to expand regional collaboration in climate action, Korea is also leading the discussion to launch the Partnership for ASEAN Republic of Korea Methane Action. We all know that methane is an important greenhouse gas in climate action. This initiative will help strengthen collaboration in this region to implement concrete actions for climate change mitigation as well as adaptation. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today to share our climate action plans and discover how we can actively cooperate in the pathway towards our collective goal. It is very encouraging that we can share in this event our will to achieve it and also our plan to achieve it. Also, our region can continue to be a pace setter of the world economy in the transition towards carbon neutrality. Therefore, I hope all of you have a useful and insightful discussion in this room today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. May I now give the floor to Mr. Phan Van Tran, Deputy Director General, Department of Climate Change, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, Vietnam. You have the floor, sir.
His Excellency Hung Un, President Kim, Ambassadors, the Deputy Minister of Climate Change, Republic of Korea, Madam Amida Samsiot Ashi Habana, Under Secretary General of the UN and Executive Secretary of the ESCAP. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be here with you today online for our joint side event on the topic sharing ambitions and the way forward, carbon neutrality goal and cooperation in the ASEAN Pacific, co-organized by the Republic of Korea and Socialist Republic of Vietnam. As you all know, after ratifying the Paris Agreement, we are bound to contribute to the global effort in tackling climate change. The government of Vietnam is among the pioneers and takes it very seriously. We have mobilized the whole political system at all levels, from the central to local organizations to individuals to participate in this effort. Vietnam submitted its first NDC or INDC at its time in October 2015. It's updated NDC in September 2020. At COP26, November 2021, Prime Minister of Vietnam announced that we will make use of our own domestic resources, along with cooperation and support of the international community, especially from the developed countries, in terms of finance and technology, including through mechanism under the Paris Agreement, in order to achieve net zero emission by 2050. Within 6 months since November 2021, many concrete actions have been implemented by Vietnam to realize our commitment at COP26, including net zero emission by 2050, amongst the development of the National Climate Change Strategy to 2050, the revision of the Power Development Plan to 2045, the scheme on breakthrough tasks and solutions to implement the commitment at COP26. These documents have been submitted to the Prime Minister for consideration and approval. We also translated our responsibility in implementing the Paris Agreement, including implementation of Vietnam NDC, into domestic legal system, including the National Law on Environmental Protection 2020. Vietnam has done utmost to implement its responsibility assigned by the Paris Agreement. We would like to call for urgent action of all countries, organizations, and individuals to respond to climate change, including getting net zero emission as soon as possible by 2050. I would like to urge cooperation in the ASEAN Pacific, the support from developed partners in implementing the long-term development strategies to increase resilience and reach the net zero by the mid of the century. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. May I now invite Ms. Armida Salcia Alisabana, Undersecretary General of the UN and Executive Secretary of ESCAP, to deliver her remarks. Ibu, you have the floor.
Excellency, Madam Hyun Jenny Kim, Ambassador and Deputy Minister of Climate Change of the Republic of Korea, Mr. Pham Van Tan, Deputy Director General, Department of Climate Change, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Vietnam, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I warmly welcome you all to the side event on sharing ambitions and the way forward, carbon neutrality goals and cooperation in the Asia Pacific. The Glasgow Climate Pact, adopted last year by COP26, secured near global net zero to limit the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. The Asia Pacific region, as all of us know, accounts for more than half of the global greenhouse gas emissions, and hence to keep net zero in sight, we urgently need immediate and concerted action. I believe we have made a good start when 39 Asia Pacific member states have already pledged to net zero carbon emission by or around mid-century. However, the commitments of countries must be realized through the speedy development of long-term low-carbon development strategies and plans. Climate change needs to be mainstreamed into legal framework and development plan, divesting from coal and fossil fuels, phasing out fossil fuel subsidies will unlock finance for investment into accelerating the investment in renewable energy. The application of carbon pricing instruments can create the liquidity required to drive economic activity up, but at the same time also emissions down. If we do not make significant emission reduction in the coming years, so definitely, yeah, we will lose our last chance to contain the global temperature rise within the 1.5 degrees. So therefore, very important for us today to share our ambition, reaffirm our commitments, and also begin transitioning to carbon neutrality, as well as share the best practices, concrete solutions that maybe many of you are already promoting. We should learn from each other by sharing our thoughts, experiences, and expertise. We should also act rapidly in a concerted fashion, facilitating the collaboration of all stakeholders. The Forum on Carbon Neutrality Goals of China, Japan, and Republic of Korea, held November last year, is a very good example of this approach or aspect. It brought policymakers, experts, all stakeholders, for that matter, to foster collective thinking about how to move towards net zero carbon emission. So I believe this effort should be rapidly expanded in and beyond Asia Pacific region, and particularly among the countries of Southeast Asia. Again, yes, several countries, Southeast Asia, big emerging countries, it would be great, yeah, if they could also take this leadership role. And so, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that ESCAP is fully committed in supporting member states in achieving this goal. Our ESCAP-wide carbon neutrality partnership would greatly contribute to regional as well as global low-carbon development. We will continue to make efforts to listen to the needs of countries, facilitate dialogues between countries, across stakeholders, and promote the collaboration. So I hope the event can build momentum in moving towards this end, yeah, that our pledge commitment to carbon neutrality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ibu. We will now take a quick group photo as we transition to the roundtable discussion. May we request Ambassador Kim, the Executive Secretary, and all speakers for a quick photo shoot to mark the side event. Online speakers, may we request that you join by turning on your camera. We shall now proceed with the roundtable discussion. The session will be moderated by Dr. Katinka Weinberger, Chief Environment and Development Policy Section, Environment and Development Division. Katinka, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Excellencies, the delegates and participants, I'm very pleased to moderate this segment of the session. The Asia-Pacific region accounts for more than half of all global greenhouse gas emissions, so there's really no question at all that a significant reduction at global level can only be achieved if this region also provides its contributions. So the question really is, how can we speed up and how can we scale out actions to achieve that reduction, and how can countries collaborate and therefore achieve more together? I'm really very pleased to have a series of excellent speakers lined up to tackle this question. We will have several government representatives who will share national strategies and plans to achieve carbon neutrality, and this will be followed by expert panelists from some regional institutions. Now, I, as a moderator, have been given a nearly insurmountable task. We have 8 speakers and 30 minutes. So I would really like to ask all of you, whether you're here in person or online, to be really brief and focused in your interventions and to focus on the key and main messages. So with that, let us move to our first speaker, Mr. Hyun Kim. Who's the second secretary and the climate diplomacy division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Republic of Korea. and who I would like to ask to address the question of key policies and innovative approaches that your government has implemented since announcing the goal of achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. And if in your response, you could also address the question on how we could support and strengthen cooperation between countries in the region to achieve carbon neutrality. Over to you, Mr. Kim.
Thank you, Extinguished Moderator, for giving me this floor to talk briefly on how the Korean government is actively cooperating with international society to realize strong climate action that will support global transition to carbon neutrality. As was depicted by my ambassador in the opening remarks, our government has set out its carbon neutrality goal, very ambitious one, in December 2020. And this goal is ambitious because taking into account our industry structure and the relatively short time until carbon neutrality after reaching carbon peak, it is very ambitious one, but our government will do its best to support this ambitious goal by realistic, achievable action plans that can guide our society into this transition. These action plans will be guided by these main realms that mainly focuses on mobilizing action from private sectors and ambitious action that will give a clear signal to all parts of our society. First, as I mentioned before, we will do our best efforts to accomplish the NDC goals by 2030. Our NDC is already lined up with the carbon neutrality goal in 2050. And it will be supported by restructuring the energy mix of our country efficiently, including the expansion of nuclear and renewable power. Secondly, Korea will also pursue innovation of green technology and nurture human resources to back up this transition. We will strengthen the R&D to boost a new growth engine. It is in the very strong minds of human resources that global threat has always turned out to be an opportunity. So the Korean government will try to focus on this realm. And thirdly, Korea will also supplement our domestic emissions trading scheme, which is one of the largest and one of the earliest in our region. And by facilitating the expansion of ESG management and green finance, will operate also a consulting program to support small to medium-sized firms for facilitating greenhouse gas reductions, and provide also substantial financial support to them, including tax benefits. Lastly, but which I think this is the most important one, is that Korea will enhance global cooperation to tackle climate change. Korea is now home to 3 very important international institutions in climate action, which is the Green Climate Fund in finance, the Global Green Growth Institute in policymaking, and lastly, the CTC and PLO, which is the main implementing body of the technology mechanism in UNFCCC. Korean government will expand our cooperation with these organizations in order to seek for a synergy between the 3 very important pillars of climate action. But to address the second question raised up by the moderator, to even more scale up climate action in the Asia Pacific, apart from these national goals, the foundation of international cooperation, multilaterally and bilaterally, is very important. So in this light, the Korean government is leading the discussions with the ASEAN countries to tackle methane reduction issues. As you might be all aware of, methane is a global agenda in climate action, but it is also a regional agenda for our region because our region accounts for nearly 30 or 40% of methane emissions globally. But at the same time, there are readily available technology to tackle methane emissions at a very low cost. So by implementing and institutionalizing a cooperation system of methane reduction, we will try to build a strong foundation to build our capacity and aim for very rapid and robust effects that will limit global warming and keep our track to the Paris Agreement goals. As I mentioned, we will assure that our actions towards the carbon neutrality goal will be reviewed and verified with very close cooperation and conversation with our society, that to ensure that we are always on track, because I believe that we don't have too much time to lose in this very critical decade of action. Thank you, moderator, for giving me this floor.
Thank you very much for setting the scene so nicely, Mr. Kim. Our next speaker is Dr. Vivi Lazwati, advisor to the Minister on Social Affairs and Poverty Reduction in the Ministry of National Development Planning in Indonesia, also here with us in the room. The question to you is, how are you addressing low carbon development in Indonesia, and what are your recommendations for achieving a greener and more sustainable future in the region?
Thank you very much, Dr. Okatingkai, moderator, dear distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Some key policies and innovative approach that we do to achieve the carbon neutrality goals include the integrations of environmental development in the National Medium-Term Development Plan 2020-2024 as a pathway toward the green economy. There are 3 programs that we are incorporated in the planning documents. It includes the increasing environment quality, enhancing disaster and climate resilience, and low carbon development as development priorities. So, for example, under the improving environment quality, we doing the improving the quality of water, air, seawater, land cover, and handling pollutant. And in fact, the condition from the 2021 is already exceed the target of the environment quality index, 27 compared to 69 in 2024. And then the program priority second on the enhancing disaster climate resilience. It's been done through strengthening the convergence between disaster risk reductions and climate change adaptations, as well as for the low carbon development through the emission reduction policy and emissions intensity in the priority areas, including energy, transportation, land, waste, industry, and marine. Under the climate resilience action priority, for example, we are focusing in 4 priority sectors. It includes the marine and coastal sectors, water sectors, agriculture, and health sectors. Spread all over 514 agencies. There are many projects going on to reduce the to improve our climate resilience actions. For the priority sector, under the low carbon development, include the sustainable energy development, and the strategy consists of the increasing energy efficiency, energy conservations, improvement in energy generation and distribution technology, as well as sustainable transportations. And under the sustainable land restorations, there are many efforts on the peatland restorations and management, reforestations, deforestation, rate management, and increased agricultural productivity and efficiency. For the waste management and circular economy, we're trying to integrate the solid waste management in many cities, the wastewater management and resource efficiencies, as well as put an effort for the green industry development and low carbon marine and coastal. Other innovative approach, we do some studies on circular economy as part of low carbon development. Our ministry worked together with the UNDP and the government of Denmark, done the study which shows the benefit from the circular economy. Under the economic benefit, for example, there are some potential to generate an additional economic-wide GDP, about 593 to until 638 trillion rupiah by 2030. For the social benefit, the circular economy could create 4.4 million net job by 2030, which 75% of it represented by female workers. For environment benefit, it may reduce waste generation by 18 to 52% compared to the business as usual scenario in 2030 and reduce the carbon dioxide equivalent emissions by 126 million tons. So the circular economy under the umbrella of low carbon development, indeed the vehicle for improving the quality of the environment, achieving the green economy, and supporting a more sustainable recovery. We do also some implementation for low carbon development. For example, in mangrove rehabilitations in post-tailing areas, in some areas. In Bangka Belitung, for example, there are some additional income for local ecotourism group, about 50 to 65 million Indonesian rupiah, and 164 individuals direct benefits ex-local mining workers turned into green job, in addition to the 50 hectares mangrove rehabilitations. In rice intensification in East Nusa Tenggara, for example, there are up until 1 million rupiah additional income per family per month. And then the reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from the use of organic fertilizer and increasing farmers' capacity in implementing smart farming.
Dr. Lazwati, can I ask you to wrap up?
Yeah. To close, our president asked us to put an effort for a greener and more sustainable future and build the ecosystem of carbon economy to be creative and integrated as well as inclusive and fairness. So the potential modality for multilateral and regional cooperations include to create an enabling environment, to encourage synergy between investment and job creations with green development, to encourage innovation in mobilizing, supporting resources for green economy implementations, and strong partnership between stakeholders to ensure that economic activities, production, and consumptions are carried out in a sustainable way. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lazwati, for sharing the breadth of areas that the government in Indonesia engages in. Our next speaker is Mr. Pham Van Tan. He was with us before, the Deputy Director General in the Department of Climate Change, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment of Vietnam, who's online. Over to you, please. Sorry, I should, of course, ask you the question first. And the question to you is, your government recently hosted a series of consultations with key stakeholders for the draft National Strategy on Climate Change for 2050. What are the main objectives of the new strategy and the key takeaways from the recent consultations in relation to achieving carbon neutrality as planned?
Thank you very much, moderators. And then I have presentation. Could you please share with us? Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you may know that in COP26, Vietnam have 5 major commitments. We get net zero by 2050. We fade out coal by 2040, and we join with reduce methane 30% by 2030 compared to 2020 level. After COP26, we have major significant actions. First, the government established the National Committee to oversee the implementation of what we have committed at COP26. We revise and update our Power Development Plan 8 up to 2045. We update our National Climate Change strategies and many other actions as well. Next one, please. So it's related to the power development. Before, you can see that the combination of the renewable energy before and after COP26 is significant change in Vietnam. Next one, please. With the climate change strategy, our objective is to reduce greenhouse gas emission toward net zero emission by 2050 as well as to reduce vulnerabilities, loss and damage to associate with climate change. We have the climate change adaptation, and then we also have the climate change mitigation. Next one, please. For climate change mitigation, by 2030, we will reduce 43% of the greenhouse gas compared to BAU, which is a significant change compared with our current NDC is only 27%. And we also identify the sectors that each sector have to do their own task with the maximum greenhouse gas emission by each sector. We also required own facility that have 3,000 tons of CO2 emission have to do greenhouse gas reduction and CSG implementation. And that level will reduce to 2,000 by 2030 and lower after 2030. Next one, please. By 2050, we will get net zero by 2050. Along that, we will get emission peak in 2035, and then identify the targets of each sector have to achieve for energy, agriculture, LULUCF, waste, and IP. We also request own facilities have emission level more than 200 tons of CO2 annual have to do greenhouse gas emission reduction. Next one, please. So in summaries, we can say that low greenhouse gas emission development, including net zero emission, is very hard but right choice to protect global system. It should be reflected in short, medium, and long-term plan involved and implemented by individuals, organization, sector. Vietnam commitment at COP26 is very strong, and then it's already reflected in legal system of Vietnam, short and long-term action. Significant steps have been done to trigger the participation of all stakeholders. In order to achieve target of net zero emission by 2050, Vietnam to rapidly reduce fossil fuel, especially coal-fired plant, and switch to low emission technologies. But these technologies are very costly and then not that complete, such as CCS, hydrogen, etc. The goal of reducing national energy security is still challenging. Domestic supply is not enough to meet requirement. The efficiencies of energy exploration and use is still low. And then the energy markets have not been developed fully yet. So Vietnam needs support and cooperation of all the international community, and especially the country in the Asia Pacific region. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much also to you, Mr. Pham Van Tan, for this very succinct overview on your targets in the various sectors. My next speaker now is Mr. Choji Kaitaro, the Deputy Director in the Office of the Director for International Cooperation for Transition to Decarbonization and Sustainable Infrastructure in the Global Environment Bureau of the Ministry of Environment of Japan. Mr. Choji Kaitaro is also online and will also respond to the question of key policies and innovative approaches to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. Sorry for having a very long name of the division. If you could share the screen of my presentation, it would be great. So thank you very much, first of all, for inviting Japan to join this event. So I'd like to touch upon briefly on the domestic effort of Japan. So last year, Japan increased ambition, and a current target of the long-term strategy is net zero by 2050. And NDC showed the target to reduce the 46% of reduction from the 2013 level, while we commit to continue to the strenuous effort to the reduced up to 50%. Next slide, please. So to implement this long-term strategy under NDC domestically in Japan, Japan emphasized 2 points. One is about R&D, and the second one is subnational. For R&D, you can see in the second part of the screen slide, 25 billion US dollars fund which supports R&D. We prepared this last year and this year. And the second one is about subnational. We have the two major countermeasures. One is about a 200 million grant for local governments, and another is another 200 million US dollars public and private fund. Through this additional effort, we try to create more than 100 leading decarbonized regions by 2030. That's all from Japanese side.
Thank you very much also to you for being very succinct. This concludes the national level interventions, and we would now like to hear from a set of speakers who will address the question of opportunities to foster carbon neutrality from a sub-regional or regional perspective. And our first speaker in this next round is Raja Siamsul Anwar, the Director of International Department in the Bank Negara Malaysia, who joins us online. And I would like to ask you to please share with us some of your initiatives to achieve carbon neutrality in Southeast Asia. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Ms. Kantika. Good afternoon, fellow panelists and audience. Let me first thank the organizers for having me here today to share some thoughts on achieving carbon neutrality from the perspectives of Malaysia and ASEAN. Thank you also for the question. Given my background, my sharing today will be from the perspective of a financial sector regulator, particularly for the banking sector. Let me begin by emphasizing that addressing climate change is a critical agenda for ASEAN. Like many parts of the world, ASEAN is getting warmer. We have experienced a cumulative temperature increase of between 0.3 to 1.1 degrees Celsius since the 1960s. We are extremely vulnerable to climate change and extreme weather events due to our geographical and demographic factors, as well as dependence on agriculture sector, natural resources, and forestry for growth. There have been numerous weather-related disasters with profound economic and human losses. Against this background, ASEAN has individually and collectively demonstrated a higher level of commitment and effort to address climate change in recent years. Individually, we are all parties to the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. Most of us have made net zero pledges. Our collective efforts are evident across various sectors, including agriculture, energy, disaster management, and finance. We also attest our aspirations and commitments to contribute towards global climate targets through our joint statement on climate change to UNFCCC COP. We can all appreciate that climate change is a global problem that requires global solutions. At the same time, we should recognize that ASEAN economies have different levels of development and social constructs. Our challenges and starting points also differ compared to more advanced economies. Our transition towards a low-carbon economy must reflect this. A key enabler to achieving our transition goals is sustainable finance. This is an important ASEAN agenda. I'm happy to share that we have made some important strides on this front. Let me mention a few. In 2017, ASEAN developed the ASEAN Green Bond Standards. Last year, we achieved other milestones, and these include development of the ASEAN Sustainable Banking Principles and the issuance of the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance version 1 in conjunction with the UNFCCC COP26. The ASEAN Taxonomy will be our common language to guide businesses and investors in pursuing green and transitional activities. To cater for diversity of ASEAN member states, the ASEAN Taxonomy adopts a multi-tiered approach a principle-based foundational framework which provides a qualitative assessment of activities, and a plus standard with metrics and thresholds to further qualify and benchmark eligible green activities and investments. We acknowledge that we are at a rather early stage of our journey towards net zero. The ASEAN taxonomy is a key component of a bigger sustainable finance ecosystem that ASEAN aims to further develop. On that note, ASEAN is developing an ASEAN Green Map. The ASEAN Green Map is an aspirational document that will lay out the essential building blocks for a comprehensive sustainable finance ecosystem in the region. Let me touch a bit now on what Malaysia is doing in this space. Malaysia, through Bank Negara Malaysia, plays a leading role in the regional sustainable finance agenda, particularly in the development of the ASEAN taxonomy and in developing regional capacity to prepare its members for transition. Beyond ASEAN, Bank Negara Malaysia is an active member of the Network for Greening the Financial System, or NGFS, Steering Committee, and is co-chairing the NGFS Task Force for Capacity Building and Training. We hope to fully utilize these opportunities to further drive the region's preparedness. Within Malaysia, our efforts are centered on aligning the financial sector regulatory and supervisory framework to account for climate and environmental risks. Malaysia is also working to strengthen financial sector preparedness, taking into account risk management and scenario analysis, proliferation of green and sustainable solutions, and mobilization of capital towards green projects and technology. Our immediate priorities include implementation of the climate change and principle-based taxonomy issued in April 2021. And this taxonomy is aligned with the ASEAN Taxonomy 1 I spoke of earlier. Financial institutions in Malaysia are also expected to make mandatory climate-related risk disclosure starting 2024. Through the Joint Committee on Climate Change, or JC3, the financial regulators, in partnership with the financial industry and NGOs, are focusing efforts on building the capacity of the financial sector in two key areas, namely in managing risks associated with climate change and in support and nurturing businesses and their clients to embrace sustainable practices in order to catalyze an orderly and just transition for the Malaysian economy. On the question of what more can be done, key will be collective responsibility. Climate change transcends borders and must be addressed collectively. Moving forward, the global climate agenda requires collective action that improve climate equity and mitigate risks of disorderly transition. Advanced economies can help and play a key role in ensuring that climate finance, technology, and talent flow to emerging and developing economies. This will support the economies in undertaking concrete mitigating actions as they embark on green pathways. With emerging and developing economies on full green pathways, the global climate agenda should succeed at a faster pace. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anwar, for sharing your perspectives, including through a focus on initiatives in the climate finance sector. Our next speaker is Dr. Zulfikar Yurnaidi, Senior Officer on Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency and the 7th ASEAN Energy Outlook Project Manager, is also online. Could you please share your key initiatives to achieve carbon neutrality in ASEAN and also share your thoughts and proposals on additional efforts that may be needed to support the transition towards net zero? Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Good afternoon, distinguished speakers and also audience. My name is Zulfikar Yurnaidi. I'm from ASEAN Center for Energy. We are an intergovernmental organization within ASEAN structure that represents the 10 ASEAN member states' interests, especially in the energy sector. We serve the ASEAN member state as a think tank, catalyst, and also knowledge hub in the region. Please allow me to start with sharing with you the carbon neutrality trend in the ASEAN member states. According to the detailed plans through the NDC or the long-term strategies, also the statements by government officials at the COP26, we noted that Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Laos PDR already have targets to achieve net zero emissions or carbon neutrality by 2050. Meanwhile, Singapore has a target to reach it beyond 2050, and Indonesia has a target to reach net zero by 2060. Brunei and Cambodia have mentioned the net zero emissions or carbon neutrality by 2050, but currently still do not have the specific target of it. Meanwhile, the Philippines and Myanmar have not made such a net zero announcement so far. Let me continue with the regional initiatives, especially from the perspective of energy, which is the biggest contributor of the greenhouse gas emissions. In the regions, since 1999, the regional energy cooperation in ASEAN is guided by the APAEC, which is the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation. The current iteration is the APAEC 2016-2025, Phase 2 2021-2025, which takes the theme of enhancing energy connectivity and market integration in ASEAN to achieve energy security, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability for all. So these are what we call the four pillars of energy cooperation in the region. And we also take the sub-theme of accelerating energy transition and strengthening energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation. The philosophy of energy transition in the region is a just energy transition. So the one that does not abandon the principle of security, equity, and affordability. And this also shown in the 7 program area of the APAEC, which consists of all technologies, including power, oil and gas, clean coal technology, renewable energy, energy efficiency and conservation, policy planning, and even nuclear. And I think the recent trends due to the post-pandemic energy recovery and also Ukraine crisis shown clearly the importance of energy security, especially for energy transition. I will continue with the energy climate initiatives in the region. As a region, ASEAN aims to increase the share of renewable energy in primary energy supply to 23% in 2025, also to increase the RE share in installed power capacity to 35% in 2025. And it also aims to reduce energy intensity by 32% by 2025, according to 2005 as a base, and also encourage ENC efforts, especially in transport and industry. We have noted that the pandemic negatively affected the economy and also energy sector, but we also noted that the growth of renewable energy has been outstanding. By 2020, for example, around 33.5% of installed capacity is in form of renewables, mostly coming from hydro, followed by solar. So this is 1.5% point lower than the target in 2025. Nevertheless, the pace of energy intensity reduction and also RE share in TPS is still not yet enough to reach the regional target in 2025, especially according to the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook, or AO6. Therefore, accelerated efforts, especially in line with the pandemic recovery, are seen as crucial for the region. Regional initiatives in concert with the national ones that we have observed in the region include the improvement of standard and labeling, development of sustainable EE in building and cooling roadmaps, which has just been launched recently by the ASEAN Ministers of Energy meeting. Then also enhancement of private and financial sector synergy and development of long-term RE roadmap, RE information and training center. Last, to answer about the insights for the energy transition towards carbon neutrality. First, what we'd like to say is the recent trends bring forward again the importance of energy security and energy price to the top and center of the energy sector discussion globally. Therefore, we would like to note that the energy transition should also address these two issues. A clear economic benefits should be used to incentivize this transition. Stringent targets, be it in RE, EENC, or climate, are important, but what's more crucial is its implementation. Ambitious yet attainable and clear roadmap need to be built upon actions and milestones that needs to be complemented with strong capacity in the region itself, be it in regulatory, financial, and technical. Also, we noted that the availability of detailed and credible data is actually very crucial in developing these effective policies. According to the AO6, we noted that the transport, power, and industry are the key sectors for decarbonizations. Especially in power sectors, I would like to add that increasing RE capacity is important, but what is more important is optimizing its generation or the dispatch. Therefore, storage and grid strengthening are the keys. In the end-use sector, electrification would be the key. Higher utilization of bioenergy are the two strategies that fit well with the situation and indigenous energy availability in the ASEAN. The electrification is also to be complemented with the use of energy efficient appliances, of course. Last, concluding all the strategies, I would like to refer back to the latest APAEC subtheme, cooperation and innovation. Transitioning the big ship that is ASEAN energy sector will be very difficult and requiring concerted efforts and supports, especially in finance, in addition to technology and regulatory. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yunaidi. Clearly, there are more opportunities still in the energy sector to be taken. Our next speaker is Mr. Ju Soo Min, Senior Investment Officer in the Global Green Growth Institute, also online. The GGGI had launched a methane initiative, and our question to you is, how can this initiative contribute to carbon neutrality, and why is methane reduction critical in the shift to net zero? What concrete approaches can be proposed to tackle methane emissions? Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Weinberger. Hello, fellow panelists. So why is methane reduction critical in the shift to net zero? And as mentioned by others in the session, methane is much more potent. It has a global warming potential of approximately 30 times that of carbon dioxide within a span of 100 years. So, and the global concentration of methane is rising. So countries definitely have to consider reducing methane emissions alongside their efforts to reduce CO2 emissions to achieve the shift to net zero. And about GGI's initiative, how can this initiative contribute to carbon neutrality? I think there are three main areas that this initiative contributes. And the first is it helps raise awareness about methane in general, because a lot of the dialogue and narrative to date has been on carbon dioxide mainly, for good reason. But like I said, the other greenhouse gases like methane, they also require action for the region to, progress towards its net zero objective. So having this initiative, a big part of it is raising awareness. The second objective or contribution of this initiative is that it helps countries buy time. And decoupling the economy from carbon, it's a long-term endeavor, and it's not something that happens overnight. You need to achieve significant structural shifts in the economy. And while that long-term change is happening, you can take relatively cheap and cost-effective action with respect to methane that helps you, at least maintain or reduce the increase in carbon emissions as you work out that transition. So I think those two are the biggest contributions of this initiative to carbon neutrality in the region. And finally, what concrete approaches can be proposed to tackle methane emissions? So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind will be, okay, it'd be good to design and finance and implement methane reduction projects in the agricultural sector, where rice and livestock, there are the biggest sources, where you can work on the waste sector, covering landfills, or working with the oil and gas companies to reduce the leakage called fugitive emissions. I mean, these projects are a big part of the concrete approach, but GGI's initiative, we want this to be something more than a one-off. So we are trying to build a foundation in our member countries, which includes almost every ASEAN country. And so we want to help people with the right skill set make the decisions with respect to methane, whether it's policy or project. And so we want to have proper mechanisms and institutions in place so that these people are empowered to make those decisions. And also we want to help with the more tactical aspects of measuring methane emissions, because the emissions from livestock spread over a wide area, or rice paddies, again, diffuse and over a wide area, they require sophisticated equipment and technology. So that is another area that we're looking to support. And actually this was mentioned over and over again in the country's submission to UNFCCC that they need support in this area. And finally, so this is my last comments. Finally, we also want to have a platform where countries can share what they learned, because a lot of the ASEAN countries, they have a lot of commonalities, especially with respect to agriculture. For instance, almost every country we grow rice, including Korea, Republic of Korea. So those three additional elements, in addition to reduction projects, are the concrete approaches we have in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much for these insights, Mr. Min. And that brings us to our last but not least speaker, Mr. Tae-Kun Kim, who's also here in the room with us, a principal researcher in the Center for Climate Technology Cooperation Policy in the Green Technology Center. Mr. Kim, COP26 emphasizes the urgency of scaling up action and support, including technology transfer for climate adaptation. As an important think tank in responding to climate change, what are your thoughts and proposals for countries in the Asia-Pacific region in support of climate technology policies and transfer?
Yeah, thank you very much, honorable moderator, and good afternoon, distinguished participants and ladies and gentlemen. In order to give an answer, let me start with a brief introduction of our institute, Green Technology Center, shortly GTC. GTC is a government-funded research institute for green technology policy. And one of very important working fields is to support our Korean NDE, Ministry of Science and ICT. And it is in charge of technology transfer negotiation under UNFCCC, and especially under the technology mechanism. And moreover, current NDE does contribute on activating technical assistance, TA, together with CTCN, Climate Technology Center Network for mitigation and adaptation globally. And GTC mandated to strengthen technology transfer cooperation with green technology, provide support for technical assistance together with the Korean climate technology networks. We have more than 85 members in Korea. And with the approach of so-called pro bono, in which the identified demands of our partner countries are supported to implement in a technical assistance form with the government's budget. The TA projects are in some cases a link to the next scaled projects, like official development assistance or green climate funds project cases and more. This year, Korean NDE and GTC identified 13 demands cases of CTCN's partner countries via CTCN headquarters, and 6 among them are from the Asia-Pacific region. So considering the pro bono approach demands, we'll support 3 selected this year and try to increase cooperation cases from next year. The 3 demands cases of 6 from the Asia-Pacific regions, for example, are in the adaptation fields like flood prediction, weather forecasting, and alert system, and monitoring and assessment of the coastal risk. And one more important thing I would like to share is that the Partnership and Liaison Office, PLO, actually is Mr. Kim, a Deputy Director of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, already mentioned, is established since October last year in Songdo, Korea. And PLO's role is to strengthen cooperation with the Green Climate Fund or National Designated Entity support in the Asia-Pacific region, and RD&D cooperation, stressing the demonstration stage, and the pro bono styled approach. Actually, I'm not a person from CTCN, but I'm advertising somehow for it. Anyway, the PRO is planning to have an opening ceremony in July this year to start with its work. So Korean NDE and GTC will cooperate with the CTCN headquarters and the CTCN PLO in Korea for realizing challengeable goals of net zero in the Asian Pacific region, and demand and supply financing linkage to the next scaled up stage, a relevant capacity building, and all these will be planned and implemented together for reaching out the global goals of mitigation and adaptation. This systematic cooperation and efforts by our technical assistance will contribute surely on carbon neutrality in a sustainable way in the Asia-Pacific region. So on behalf of Korean NDE, I hope for more active cooperation with our partner countries in the Asian-Pacific region. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kim, also for these perspectives. And indeed, thank you very much, all speakers, for sharing these, very interesting perspectives from your respective countries, and also exciting examples, really, from the region that we heard today. And I think what has come out very clearly is that ESCAP member countries should utilize these complementary potentials to jointly accelerate progress in achieving the goals that we discussed today. So with this, I would like to hand back to Ronnie again as the MC to proceed for closing the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Katinka. We are now near the end of our program. For closing remarks, may I invite Dr. Gunbold Basanjav, head of the ESCAP East and Northeast Asia office.
Thank you, Ronnie. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear participants, I'd like to thank you all for your attendance and valuable contributions to the event. The event discussed a critical issue for the people and the planet. Especially, we heard the visions and national strategies and policies from distinguished speakers from the Republic of Korea, Indonesia, Vietnam, Japan, and Malaysia towards net zero by mid-century. It was my great pleasure to see the strong commitment of member states. Speakers also discussed challenges in achieving carbon neutrality and measures to address them, including creating an enabling environment for green development, encouraging innovations with technology transfer, forming strong partnerships between stakeholders, and investing in research and development. Building on these discussions, I believe that we should ensure the strong commitment of member states in Asia and the Pacific region, continue to support the development of national strategies and policies, and encourage all stakeholders to take collective action with concrete, detailed, and responsive action plans. In addition to the voices of member states, we could listen also to the insights shared by experts from several regional institutes on the need to promote innovations in policy, technology, and financing through development of a sustainable finance ecosystem, promotion of renewable energy and energy efficiency with a clear roadmap and focus on transport, power, and industry sectors, reduction of methane in addition to CO2 emissions, and transfer of green technology and technical assistance reflecting demands of countries. All these points discussed during today's side event are well noted, reinforcing the fact that indeed we have shared ambitions and responsibilities. Going forward with these key messages, let us join forces and work together to achieve the common goal of carbon neutrality in our respective capacities. Thank you very much for all your participation.